Welcome everyone. I don't see you guys, but hopefully you can see me or you can see my slides. So my name's Tim Ebbles and I'm the Director of the MRes in Biomedical Research at Imperial College. Just to reiterate again, we're going to record the session so that people can look at it afterwards if they have any further questions or if they weren't able to make it. So keep your camera off and mute your microphone unless you're speaking, okay? So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the course for the first part. Then we'll have the co-director, Liz Want, who will give you a few words of update about the situation with COVID-19 in the course. And then one of our stream directors, Dr. Duncan Rogers, will be telling you an example of one of the streams that we run. That's the respiratory and cardiovascular science stream. And then we'll move on for the second half of this hour to try and answer some of the questions that many of you have posted over the last week. So thank you for submitting the questions. We'll see if we can cover as many as possible during that half an hour. And if we don't manage to answer them, then we will try to do those in another form after the session. Okay, so I mentioned one or two names, but here to introduce people properly. So you can see a few pictures, hopefully on the screen now. I'm the top left, I'm the course director. Top right, you have Dr. Elizabeth Want, who is both the deputy course director and also runs the main so-called BMR stream. So that's the general stream. Bottom left, you have Noelia Moreno, who is our course administrator, and bottom right is a wonderful picture of Duncan Rogers. Very happy, he's the RCVS stream lead. So these are the people that are going to be talking to you today. So you've applied to, or you're thinking of applying to our course at Imperial College. So here are a few pictures of Imperial. Top left, we have our South Kensington campus that you can see is in a very nice area of London with lots of trees around near the Royal Albert Hall and the various museums you can see in the front foreground there. And then to the right and the bottom, I've shown a few pictures of the campuses that we have. So our South Kensington campus with the Queen's Tower here. This is the main building where we're normally based when we're allowed to be on campus, the Sir Alexander Fleming building. And then we have a number of other hospital campuses across West London, so the Royal Brompton, St Mary's, Hammersmith, and there are a few more that I wasn't able to show. So that's what Imperial looks like physically. What actually is Imperial as a university? So it's a university that concentrates on science, technology, medicine, and business. It's so-called the most international university in the UK because we have a lot of international students. We're very highly ranked in university rankings. I'm not going to go into great details here. And we have a reasonably large number of students for a UK university. So about 17,000 students to 8,000 staff from all over the world, 125 different countries. 7,000 of our students are postgraduates, and we award many thousands of degrees every year. We have a huge amount of research going on here, over £170 million spent in the Faculty of Medicine every year. And the MRes, which is based at Imperial that you've applied for, is very sought after. So we have an application to places ratio of approximately 5 to 1. What is the MRes? Well, the aim of the course is to develop the future generation of leaders in biomedical research. So a very general thing, but if you come on this course, we expect you to eventually be somebody in a leadership position in biomedical research. In terms of sort of breaking down those objectives, we're going to provide you with an excellent background in biomedical research. We're going to integrate lots of different aspects, including chemical, biological, and computational aspects. We're emphasizing an investigative approach, so that's actually doing research, whether it be lab-based or computational. And we're going to look at theoretical and practical knowledge. In terms of the course structure, there's a primary content and a secondary content. The primary content is what really gets you, what's actually assessed in the degree. So that's mainly the research projects, but also the grant writing exercise. And then the secondary content comprises mostly what we call the core program. So that's things like technical workshops, research skills, sessions, journal clubs, professional development courses, and research group seminars. And all of that I've included in this blue box here happens throughout the year. Roughly once a week, you meet with the rest of your class to study these extra things which are, if you like, in addition to your research projects. And that probably is where you spend about 5 or 10% of your time, whereas the rest of your time is entirely spent on research. How does the year look? Well, if we put the year as a circle, so starting off in October, so that's actually not today, but these are usually the slides I show on the first day of the course. You have an induction period, followed by Project 1, which takes up the first half of the year. At the end of the Project 1, you have some assessments, both writing a thesis and your oral exam. In the second half of the course, you and you complete your second research project, which finishes with, again, some assessments. And then right at the end, you'll have a final viva, which is an oral exam, usually with the external examiners. So that's what the year looks like. And of course, throughout, we have this core program, which is basically allowing you to sort of meet the rest of your classmates and also imparting a lot of other additional knowledge that is outside of your project. And as most of you will know from seeing the website and doing the applications, we have a number of different streams. So each of these streams is a separate cohort of students who have a specific set of projects, usually directed at a specific area of biomedical research. And they also have a specific core program. So we have biomedical research, that's the general stream where there's no particular specialization. And we have a number of other streams, I'm not going to read them all out here, 8 in total. And you will know if you've applied to one of those specific streams. If you're not sure which stream you've been offered a place or you want to apply for, then do get in touch. And as I said, we've got the core program, which both runs across streams, so some things that streams share, and also some individualized core programs that are specific to individual streams. We asked previous students what they think of the course in a few words. This is just a word cloud saying, sort of summarizing what they said. So I think the most interesting things that come out there are that it's interesting, it's challenging, practical skills, and it's all about research. But I think you can see a few other things, you know, intense, inspiring, hard work, that kind of thing. So probably what you might expect. Where can you do your research? Well, we have a huge number of departments and divisions within the Faculty of Medicine and outside it that are providing research projects. I've listed a few here. It's not comprehensive, but just to say that in addition to the Faculty of Medicine in Imperial, which has maybe 500 or 600 research groups, you also have some external institutes that offer projects as well, like the Francis Crick Institute or perhaps some companies like AstraZeneca. Many of you will have applied with the thought that you might be thinking to go on and do research later on, perhaps a PhD. And this course is intended to prepare people for doing PhDs and research jobs later on. So over the last 15 years, we've trained probably more like 500 MRes students, or more than 500 now. And probably I'd say more than 400 of those have gone on to do PhDs. Here are some statistics. Again, I don't want to go into great details, but you can see that as the course has expanded, that's the blue bars here, the number of people going on to do PhDs in the orange bars has increased just as much. And just a very important point, that quite a lot of those students obtain the offer for their PhD while they're actually studying the MRes. So you don't need to have an offer for a PhD before you come and do the course. Where do people go afterwards? Well, here are just a few examples. One of our early graduates, Dr. Volker Behrens, he's now a senior lecturer, so that's a faculty member at Roehampton University in London. His research looks at bacterial pathogens, how they interact with their environment and colonize hosts. And he says that given he was trained as a plant biochemist, it's fair to say that the MRes had a big influence on his career. Here's a more recent graduate from our data science stream, Dr. Aaron Bjorn Kolbeinsen. He's just recently obtained his PhD, which was around medical predictions using machine learning and brain MRI and genome sequencing data. And he thinks that the MRes was able to provide him with the idea of what he wanted to do for his PhD and prepare him for everything from setting up experiments to data processing and inspecting the stability of models. And finally, just another example of somebody who didn't go into research per se, Dr. Julia Langer. She's now a policy officer at the European Commission, Health and Food Safety. She did our course, but also one of the best years of my life on an academic and personal level. She says, be inspired by all the amazing and talented people around you and push yourself to become a great scientist. So there's just a few experiences, and I think they're relatively typical of people who've done the course over the last 15 years. Finally, just want to mention that there's lots of other things that you can do, not just the academic study at Imperial. The graduate school that you'll all be member of if you take up the course offers lots of different kinds of experiences, both training in skills that are sort of outside the academic sphere, but also fun things to do, such as sort of demonstrations and fun events. And then also, of course, don't forget that there are plenty of student clubs and societies. Here's just a pictorial representation of a few of them, where you can get, again, lots of other experiences. These, by the way, are still operating even while we've been in lockdown, doing online activities and as much as they can, given the restrictions. All right, so that's the end of my introduction. So I'm going to pass on now to Dr. Elizabeth Want, who's going to give you a few slides about our approach to dealing with the COVID restrictions. So I'm just needing to stop my share. Okay.
Okay. So, yes, thank you, Tim, for that introduction. So as Tim said, I'm Deputy Director of the course and Stream Lead for the BMR stream. So a lot of the questions that did come in already in advance were understandably about the COVID situation and how that's going to impact the course. So I'm going to try and address some of those, and then in the Q&A session we can address some of these further as well, if it lets me. I always have problems with my clicking my slides on. For some reason it won't let me click my slides on. Let me see. I might have to come out of the share and do it again.
Yeah, try sharing again.
Do it from this one. Let's go in again. Right. Okay. So as I was saying, so obviously we're beginning the MRes course on schedule in the autumn. So Imperial is starting to reopen the campuses at the moment. So labs are starting to reopen with obviously the social distancing in place. So, and this is going on varying from lab to lab, how big the labs are, etc. So at the moment, the plan is that teaching will be a combination of on campus, if possible, and remote online learning, as well as the research opportunities. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. But it's really important to say, if you cannot be on campus, and we've had a few questions about this already, you will not be disadvantaged. So anything that we put on campus, say from the core program, from a teaching side, will also be available online as well. And as I'll mention as we go through about some of the projects, but if you are not able to travel to this country and be on campus, there are project opportunities for you as well. And for some reason, it doesn't want to click my next slide on either. Don't know why yours worked quite so well, Tim. So let me come out of this.
You could probably share without doing presentation mode.
I might have to just do it not in presentation mode. Okay. Apologies for this. Let's go back in and not in presentation mode. Right. So the project options that we're putting forward for this year. So we're currently recruiting our projects from a large pool of supervisors. We get a lot of interest in offering projects for this particular MRes. So at the moment, we're surveying the supervisors and recruiting the projects to get the list together for before you start. So our range of options that we're going to offer you this year is either fully or partially lab-based, as it says in the left-hand corner. So these, where possible, some labs will be open as normal, hopefully with the social distancing measures in place. So there may be sort of the opportunity to do a sort of a full lab project. Partially lab project, what we mean by this is, in a lot of cases, you would be able to be in the lab for a proportion of the project time and collect enough data during that time to have a full MRes project. And a lot of the time, you collect quite a lot of data in a fairly short amount of time from these projects. So then you would be able to analyze this data remotely. So you wouldn't need to be in the lab every day. Certain labs are considering sort of rota-based systems where maybe you share some of the tasks with other people in the lab to make sure that we can get enough people in the lab to complete projects. Obviously, we have data analysis projects as well. So these can be fully remote, and a lot of students have been choosing these anyway, even without the COVID situation. We also offer systematic reviews, which obviously can be done fully remotely. And also new this year for the cohort that are currently with us, have been doing literature reviews and grant writing sort of projects where they've done a comprehensive review of the literature, which has led to synthesizing a grant application. So these are just some of the projects that could be offered. And obviously some of these, the fully or partially lab-based ones, could be tailored depending on how much the labs reopen. So we feel we can still offer a full range of projects and give you a full experience of the MRes. So what can you learn from the MRes? Well, Tim has already mentioned about the graduate school and all the different clubs. So obviously you've got the sort of the extracurricular activities you can learn, but we feel you can also learn transferable skills. So we have oral presentations, poster presentations as part of the projects. We have journal clubs and core workshops as well. So the core workshops run on a Wednesday, and these will teach you different techniques from Western blotting, microscopy, science communication. You'll also learn time management, as well as the data analysis and laboratory skills. So there's a full range of skills that you can learn from the MRes and that you will be able to employ in future careers, such as the PhD, or the other careers that Tim mentioned. So as you can see, a lot of these we could run remotely. So the core workshops, journal clubs, science communication, these kind of workshops could be run online. So again, if you are unable to attend college, particularly in the autumn term, you would not be disadvantaged through this. So my final couple of slides, just to mention again the student experience. So as Tim mentioned, there's hundreds of clubs and societies, and many of them are able to run remotely at the moment. And obviously things are opening up as the weeks go on. We have the online library. On the student experience website, you can chat to students, current students. So you may want to do this to see what their experiences have been like. They run virtual quizzes. So there's a lot of interaction going on, despite the college not running at fully full capacity at the moment. So I just want to end by reiterating that if you cannot travel to campus for the autumn term, don't worry. You wouldn't be disadvantaged. You would be able to carry out studies remotely. As I say, we have a wide range of projects, a wide range of supervisor engagement in this. So as you can imagine, we're currently preparing the course for this 2020 intake, and we believe it's still going to be a great learning experience. So obviously anything I didn't cover in relation to COVID there, we can cover in the Q&A session at the end. But I think it's time for me to pass on to Duncan Rogers so he can give you a bit of an overview of his RCVS stream.
Okay, so Tim, I'll just try this sharing my screen. No, it's not there. So if you can show my slides for me, that'd be great. I have no idea where those slides have gone.
Okay, I'm just bringing them up now, so hang on a second.
Thanks.
Liz, you'll need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen. Hold on. I seem to have come out of my controls. There we go.
Okay. Okay, do you see them?
Yep, I can see them. Presumably everybody else can. So hi, everybody. So as Tim said at the beginning, there are 8 streams on the MRes in BMR, and I'm one of the streams, the Respiratory and Cardiovascular Science stream, the RCVS stream, and I'm the coordinator for this. And Tim's got me in just to give an example of what might happen in a stream. So Tim, if you can give me the next slide. So these are the locations and the experience. So Tim and Liz have been through these, and within the RCVS and also within the other streams, we conform to this format. So if you can hit a return, Tim, for the next bit. In particular for the RCVS, it's respiratory and cardiovascular. So we have the NHLI, the National Heart and Lung Institute at the Brompton campus, but there are also subsidiary satellite campuses as well. That's where most of the respiratory research goes on. And then on the right-hand side, we have the ICTEM building, which is in Hammersmith, which is where a lot of the cardiovascular research goes on. And so those are the two main sites, and taught elements would be, hopefully, when we do get back to having face-to-face taught elements, most of those would be at Brompton, but some would be at Hammersmith at ICTEM. So next slide, Tim. And again, as Liz said, we're going to be fully aware of COVID updates, and I'm going to adapt the RCVS stream as appropriate, trying to get back to face-to-face teaching. But in the meantime, we are now getting very experienced at doing online teaching, because obviously the students that we have at the moment are doing things online. So we're running taught sessions, a variety of experiences for them completely remotely, and that is going okay. I mean, it started off, it was a bit odd at the beginning, but we've got really good at it now. So by the time you come back, and if we are still having to have an online experience, then BMR and the streams, including RCVS, will be fully equipped for that. So next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so as you know, you've got projects, and this is the results of the first projects on the RCVS. These were their poster presentations, which was done completely online. So that was an interesting experience, but actually worked very, very well. And I've just got two examples here. On the left-hand side, we've got Laura's very nice landscape orientation poster, which was on microvesicles. She got a very good mark for that. You can see in the middle at the top, she's got her hypothesis followed by some aims. So we teach you exactly how to do proper science, hypothesis testing. And over on the right-hand side, we've got Way's poster, which again has got a hypothesis somewhere down on the left-hand side. Two very different projects. Laura happens to be from Italy and Wei happens to be from mainland China. So we've got a nice mix of students on the RCVS stream. And we worked around doing these poster presentations, and they could present their work very, very easily. So next slide, Tim. And we've also got the taught sessions, as Tim mentioned. On a Wednesday morning, there are the BMR course sessions, bioinformatics, statistics, for example. But when those aren't running, each of the streams has a specific set of lectures and other activities. So for RCVS, we tell you all about the basics of lungs and airways and heart and the vasculature. We look at pathophysiology. We look at the inflammatory pathways that are relevant to that pathophysiology, and also how to model those inflammatory pathways using animal models of cardiovascular disease and lung disease. That leads us into treatment options. How would we treat these different conditions? And also we have a very nice talk from Martin Partridge, who's a consultant respiratory physician, who can tell you all about why patients don't actually benefit from their medications, but essentially because they either don't take or don't know how to take their medications correctly. And along the way, we have other sessions on nanoparticles that get into your system, into your cardiovascular system and your lungs, and senescence. We also got specific RCVS data analysis sessions and journal clubs. So next slide, Tim. One of the things we look at is trying to do designing experiments. And I run this on the RCVS stream, and I also reproduce it on the BMR stream as well. So this is the simplest experimental protocol ever. We've got a response R on the left-hand side. We've got our control response. That leads to an increased response with stimulus, stim, and that's blocked by this inhibitor M. And you think, well, that's absolutely wonderful if you can hit return, Tim. And that looked like it might have worked. And if you can hit return again, Tim, we've got the converse of that. We've got our stimulus and our inhibitor doesn't block it. And you might think, well, that doesn't work. And the issue is the students in teams have to go away and find out how to do those experiments. So if you can hit return, Tim. And this is an example of one group who came up with this. And if you can hit return about 3 times, Tim. So when they get the histogram bars correctly, they get a nice smiley face. And if they get one that I'm not sure about, they get a puzzled face. So that was the one for worked, and that team did quite well. They got 2 smiley faces. If you can hit the return again about 3 times, Tim. So this is another team who did one and didn't work. And again, they got 2 smiley faces and a puzzled face. Bearing in mind that if you look at the next slide, Tim, there's actually 6 possibilities there. So they actually didn't do that well, 2 out of 6. And if you can now get rid of that, thank you very much, because I don't want them to have a photo. Those with the photographic memory might be able to have, they're going to have an advantage if they do the RCBS stream next year. And there's other things that you have to consider at the bottom. So Tim, if you can hit return. And this is the answer to the not worked. And as you can see, there are many, many more bars there than 2 smiley faces worth. So if you can hit return, Tim, just to get rid of that in case anybody can remember it. And there are also other things to consider. So if you hit return, Tim, thank you very much. And just one final thing is that even if you think you've done the perfect experiment, this was a publication that came out in 2004, as you can see top right. This single publication led to 15 years of research into this thing called MRes protein. And this fabulous cartoon was developed, and MRes protein was depicted as this cigar-shaped molecule. And because there was a fundamental mistake in the research that led to this cartoon, the whole thing is completely and utterly wrong. And along the way, there was a very, very expensive, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, clinical trial that was set up on the basis of this. And as you can imagine, it failed miserably. And all because there was a basic premise about this experiment, which was incorrect. And I will tell you all about that when you join the BMR MRes next year. So hit return, Tim, and thank you very much. And hit it again, hit return again, and there's a smiley face for you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Duncan. So I think, we've done a lot of talking through slides there, so hopefully that's been informative. But now what we're going to do is move on to the questions that many of you put forward in advance, and see if we can sort of address some of those specifically. So I'm just trying to find my copy of the questions, and I'll pass these around to various people in the course team, so it won't just be me speaking the whole time. So the first sort of set of questions that many people asked was around the COVID situation and how things would work next year, especially with respect to research projects. Now, Liz has already covered quite a bit of that. So just to reiterate, the autumn term between October and Christmas time, we expect social distancing measures still to be in place. And so all of the core program, that's the Wednesday morning sessions, we would expect to be delivered online. Now, that doesn't mean that, that there won't be any face-to-face opportunities. And the face-to-face opportunities, if we are able to do that with the restrictions, will be for the research projects. So for the research projects, we are hoping and expecting to be able to offer some lab-based experience. As Liz said, that might not be the traditional situation where you might have been in the lab every week for many weeks, but there are plenty of research projects that in fact don't require that anyway, even in normal situations. So it might be, as Liz mentioned, that you go into the lab for a couple of weeks to get some data which you can then work on for the rest of the project, or there might be other ways that supervisors can manage to give students lab experience. So we're working very hard with all our supervisors to be creative about how they can manage students in the lab and give them the right training and do it safely. So We do expect to have some lab-based projects, but we obviously expect that the amount of lab time on average will, many people would be happy to conduct remote projects, or say database projects or literature review type projects, and obviously that's perfectly fine under those restrictions. If you're a person who is really keen to get lab-based at the bench experience, we envisage that in the second project, the one that starts around March, you'll be able to do that much more likely than you'll be able to do in the first project. So that's the first thing to answer. I'm just going to run down some of the other questions here. So
there's something coming up in the chat. There's somebody
okay.
has a question in chat.
Yes. So yes, good point. Are there any projects related to fighting against COVID-19? Liz, would you like to take that one?
Yes, actually this year we have had a couple of students who have remained in the lab doing wet lab projects on this very topic. So yes, there will be that possibility, I would imagine, again. And those are really the projects that have taken priority in the labs and been able to run through the whole time when the college has reduced its services. So if that's something you're interested in, then definitely we should be able to help you organise something along those lines.
Great. And again, just looking down the list of sort of COVID related questions, quite a few students have been asking, what happens if I'm not able to travel to London, even if, you know, face-to-face teaching is taking place? And again, to reiterate what Liz mentioned earlier on, you will not be at a disadvantage. You will be able to conduct a remote research project, and you'll be able to access all the core program teaching remotely. Obviously, we won't be able to give you the lab experience, but if you're unable to travel in October, then you know, we can still get you on the course and you can start getting that research experience. Okay, let's see what else is in there. Is it possible to take remote learning during the whole autumn term without entering in the UK? I think we've answered that one. And somebody says they would rather not travel to the UK before Christmas. So again, that's as much as I said earlier on. Let me just reading here. Okay.
Tim, can I just say, I mean, the issue around that is that we are now running remote projects and it's all working incredibly well. So we've got the experience for you guys that are going to join in October. We've got this 6 months or more experience of doing all this online. So you're at an advantage.
That's right. So as Duncan says, we're already doing this quite successfully, actually. And actually, if we look at the learning outcomes for the research projects, I'm not going to show them right now, but in fact, a relatively small proportion of those learning outcomes are related to practical lab-based experience. We normally have about 20–25% of students on the course who are not based in labs anyway. And of course, for them, it's perfectly possible to do remote, for instance, bioinformatics projects or something like that. But we do feel that even if you're working remotely, you can actually accomplish 90–95% of the learning outcomes without visiting the lab at all. And obviously, if we're prevented from doing lab work, then that's something that examiners take into account. Okay, so let's look down the list.
Oh, Tim, another question has come in that we might want to answer now.
Okay.
So saying, based on the answer to the very first question, am I correct to assume it's possible that a person who prefers a fully lab-based project won't receive one due to a lower number of fully lab-based projects? And maybe I can just say for this, at the moment, we don't know the exact number of lab-based projects that we will get. We're encouraging supervisors to submit, when they submit projects for the MRes, to submit a range of projects. And hopefully there's ones that perhaps could start off remotely And then if the college was open with a fewer social distancing rules in place after Christmas, it can move into the lab. So there's always that possibility. But also, we've got to think that supervisors will want to get their labs back up and running as well. So we believe that supervisors, where possible, will want to get students back into the lab so that they're able to get their research up and running for grants, etc. So yes, and so at the moment we don't know the exact number. So someone else has just said, when are you going to choose your projects, and do we get the list before the autumn term starts? So do you want me to carry on, Tim? Or do you want to take that?
Yes. Why don't you go for that while I read the others?
So what we're doing at the moment is we're going to put the project call out at the beginning of July to recruit, to get students to suggest their projects. Then we compile the list, and then we send that out to you before the term starts, which is the last question that was asked. So it gives you a chance to have a look. In the questions that came through before this session, someone asked about if you look online, you can see lists of projects that have been available. So some of those in those research topics may still be available, but obviously because of the COVID situation, we don't know if the ones you can look at online at the moment will obviously be available. But we want to get the list ready as soon as possible so that you all have a chance to have a look and see what there is on there that interests you.
Excellent, thanks, Liz. And just to add to that, obviously, I think from a student's point of view, you would like to get those projects as soon as possible. But from both a research point of view and a COVID point of view, it's likely that it's much better for us to get that list to you in September, because then you'll have completely up-to-date information about what the plans are and which supervisors can offer what type of projects. If we were to try and get you a list much earlier, it would likely be out of date by October. So that's why it's timed in that fashion. I see there are quite a few other questions. Well, the remaining ones to do with COVID are mainly around visas, deferral and tuition fees. So maybe I can just take those because they are, sort of program level things. So in terms of visas, somebody asked, would we be able to provide statements about what type of learning would be available? Yes, that's perfectly possible. We're not providing a generic statement right now beyond the communications that you've already had. So if you need a specific statement on the type of learning that you'll be undertaking within the restrictions, then please ask us and we'll see if we can provide something. Some other students have been asking whether we are allowing people to defer if they feel that it's not the right course for them this year. We still think that we can provide a very good master's education, as I say, that actually hits pretty much all the learning outcomes that we would normally hit within this year. You would still learn how to do research, which is essentially the main objective of the course. That might be related to doing remote research or data-related research, for instance, but we still envisage that students, if they want, will get a significant amount of lab experience. And as I mentioned, that would probably be in the second project. Now, we can't guarantee anything because no one knows what is going to happen regarding to COVID, but that's how we expect it. So if you're somebody who really does want lab experience, then we believe that we can do that. But we're not ruling out deferrals. So if you come to the conclusion that you want to delay things, then that currently is still a feasible option. However, I should say that Imperial may take a college-wide policy view on that relatively soon.
Tim,
moving on to tuition fees.
Tim, there's
there's
a message from Daria. His internet packed up and he missed your reply to when they choose when they're going to choose projects.
Okay, just to be very quick there, I think if anybody misses anything, we should probably direct you to the recording to look at later, but in the viewing of time. But just to quickly do that one, you'll get the list of projects in September, late September. So you'll have just a week or so to look at it before you arrive. But there is a 2-week period at the beginning of the MRes where students choose their projects, so you have time to talk to supervisors and things at that point. So I was just moving on to the questions about tuition fees. People have asked, you know, will there be any adjustment to tuition fees because of the difficulty of doing lab work? Across Imperial, both undergraduate and postgraduate, there's a decision that there is not going to be an adjustment to tuition fees. That's because, as I mentioned already, we think we can offer you the experience that you know, you need in terms of learning. You will still be able to address all the learning outcomes that we would normally be able to do, and we believe that we will be able to offer some lab experience as well within that. So Imperial believes that all our courses will be able to deliver you know, the best high quality learning experience, whether it be online or with some element of face-to-face teaching as well. So I think another thing to consider practically is that actually one of the largest costs is actually the time of the people who are teaching you. So the supervisors, the people who are doing lecturing or handling tutorials, and of course those people are still there. So in terms of the sort of cost of delivering it, there's not a massive difference whether lab work is possible or not. So at the moment, there's no difference to tuition fees. All right, so let's move on to some of the other non-COVID related questions. So looking at the top of that, somebody says, I've applied for the MBHD stream. I'd like to know where I would study and do research projects. What campus? Liz, would you like to take that one?
So a lot of the projects can be spread across many of our campuses. So Tim showed the picture at the beginning of the campuses. I believe a lot of the MBHD ones are based at the South Kensington campus, but also they could be based at the Hammersmith Hospital campus as well. We've also got campuses at St Mary's and the Brompton, obviously that Duncan mentioned. But I'd say a lot of them, I believe, for MBHD are between Hammersmith and South Kensington. There is a shuttle bus that runs between these, so it's quite easy to travel between them. And so any face-to-face sessions, which as we said in the autumn term are more likely to be online, but when we go back to face-to-face, a lot of these are based at South Kensington, but that doesn't cause an issue because they're regularly on the Wednesday mornings to enable students to spend time there.
Okay, great.
Tim,
there's one or two questions.
Yeah, there's some more messages come in. One of them's about summer holidays.
Oh yeah.
So somebody's asking about an extension to the deposit payment deadline. Again, yes, at the moment, this is possible if you have a very clear reasoning around it. I think people are mentioning scholarships, for instance, from a third party. So it's still possible at the moment, but obviously as time goes on, the opportunity for deferring deposit payment will become reduced. Dorka is asking, is there an English language module for people who met the English language requirement but want to improve their English? Yes, there is extra English language tuition is available through the college's English language academic English service. So there are a number of different opportunities there. You can join formal courses, or you can actually just hook up with people to practice your English, for instance. And she also asked, can you tell us a bit about the final exam? So don't forget that this is an MRes, so it's primarily, the assessment is primarily coursework, what we would normally call coursework. So the projects are assessed by a formal project report and also an oral exam. For the first project, that's presenting a poster, and for the second project, that's presenting something like a conference talk. And then right at the end of the year, there's a final viva, which is about 30 minutes with examiners to talk about your projects. Hopefully that addresses those ones.
Tim,
I noticed in question,
Taslima says, as this is a 12 months course, do we get any break like for summer or throughout the year? Well, you get Christmas and Easter and national bank holidays. And we do let you go on holiday, but essentially it is a 12-month course, yes, apart from official holidays and college college holidays, but we do let you go on holiday, but you need to clear that with your supervisors, who are usually incredibly willing to let you go because nobody wants unhappy students.
Yeah. So I think the main thing to envisage this course is it's like being a member of one of the research groups in those labs. So as long as you're getting on with your research, you're working hard, your supervisor is probably going to be fairly happy to take a little bit of time off somewhere. The other thing to say is that although from October to say early August, it's pretty full on. There's, as Duncan mentioned, only Christmas holidays and Easter holidays, roughly 1 week each, plus the public holidays. From the middle of August, when you've submitted your second research project thesis, till the end of the year, so that's the end of September, there's only really a couple of days when you actually have to be, if you like, normally it would be on campus, or if we're not doing things on campus, it would be online. So 2 days out of that approximately 6 or 7 week period allows time for you to perhaps go and take some holiday, or as we normally term it, revise for your Viva remote from college.
Study leave.
So there is a bit of flexible time at the end.
Study leave, Tim.
Study leave, that's the one. Right.
So there are a couple. Oh, sorry, Tim. Yeah. There's a couple more come through on the chat. I don't know which one do you want to address first.
Yes, the recordings and the slides from this meeting will be available.
There's one about will project choices be limited by the stream you are on? So that's something we haven't gone into yet. But what we do when supervisors submit their projects, we ask them to nominate the stream that they feel is most applicable to. So there's usually sort of a preference stream and maybe a secondary stream. So say, for example, people submit their projects to the BMR stream. It would mean that students on the BMR stream would get priority of that project. And then the same if it was Duncan's RCVS stream, the MHD stream, etc. But it doesn't mean you can't choose projects from that stream. But we do recommend when students choose their projects, they'll rank 5 projects that they don't choose all of them off stream. And we'll give you more guidance about that nearer the time. So it is totally possible for you to be able to choose a project that is off your stream list. And that often does happen.
I've actually got, so last project I had 2 people that were off stream doing off stream projects, and I've got 1 this time on project 2 who's doing an off stream project. So it's entirely possible. But as Liz says, we give priority to students that are on the stream for stream projects.
But we're trying to make sure that you get the widest range of projects you can and the widest experience you can. So we definitely encourage you where you can to be able to do this.
Yeah, definitely.
And maybe, Tim, shall I just take the next one before we go back to you? Because it's about BMR specific lectures. Mm-hmm. So someone's asked if we can give some examples of BMR specific lectures, or are these a mixture of lectures from other streams? So there's some general lectures that are open to all the streams. For example, statistics and bioinformatics are open to the majority of the streams, unless we feel it's not applicable. And then some examples for BMR, we have lectures on mass spectrometry, NMR, Western blotting, crystallography, and then sort of more specific, we talk about microRNA, surgical robotics, various things like that. So we have a range, and we're constantly recruiting new lecturers, new academics to come in and give workshops. So as much as we can, even though a lot of them have moved online, we're trying to make them as interactive as possible.
Great. Before we come back to the questions in the chat, I just want to address a theme which came through in some of the pre-submitted questions, which was about interdisciplinarity. So some students are perhaps a bit worried about whether their background is entirely the right fit for the MRes or the stream that they've chosen, and should they be doing some other study in the summer prior to coming along. Generally, this course is designed for people with a very diverse set of backgrounds. So we have people coming from biological training, biomedical science. We have people from a slightly more medical background. We also have on our data science stream, for instance, people coming from physics or from engineering. So we have a really huge mix. That's actually one of the big positives, is that you'll meet people from a really wide array of backgrounds and be able to, you know, learn from them as well. Having said that, it isn't a bad thing at all to do a little bit of pre-training if you have the time to do it. So for instance, if you're a data science applicant and you don't have any experience with biological science or biomedical science, not a bad idea to start a little bit of looking up and looking into those sorts of areas to just give you a grounding in that. But of course, most of the training that you will get will happen in your research project. So if you come into a research project, for instance, as a data scientist with, say, an engineering background, and you need to learn some biology, for instance, I don't know, DNA replication or something, that will be what your supervisor will advise you about. So they'll say, right, okay, I understand you don't know about this subject, so go away and look at this material. We can chat about it, you can ask questions, or you can perhaps, they might direct you to some online lectures or something like that. So most of the training that will happen, that you need to do in order to go from one area to another, is something that you can do within your project, and it'll be directed by your supervisor and their team. So don't worry about having to do a huge amount of study beforehand, but as I say, it's not a bad idea if you have some time to start thinking about that.
Tim, just to say, I had 2 years ago, I had a medical doctor consultant from Russia. She'd never been out of Russia. She came onto the RCBS stream having never done any basic science in her life, wasn't able to do any work on any topics over the summer because she was doing consultancy work back in Russia, and she came out easily with a fantastic distinction. So my view is that if she can do it, anybody can do it.
That's absolutely right. We've had people from all walks of life, as I said, physicists, mathematicians, people from biochemistry, biology, medical science, even vets, veterinary science, and things like that. And, you know, everybody has managed to really do well if they put their, you know, hard work into it and they really engage with the course. So your background is not a limiting factor. If you've received an offer, then, you know, we've considered your background already, and we think you're going to benefit from this course.
Interesting enough, on one of the first cohorts, I actually had a vet on it, and she is now leading COVID trials at St. Thomas's Hospital. She went on to do a PhD, and she's leading COVID trials. So she went from vet to the MRes to leading COVID trials.
Absolutely. So as we said, you know, our objective is to train the future leaders for biomedical research. So there we have an example. And, you know, there's a number of other people we could point to who are now in sort of senior academic or other research positions who did our course years ago. All right, just to finish up on a couple of the questions that were submitted beforehand, and I can see there's one in the chat still as well. We've covered the research projects and when the project lists would be available and things like that. But somebody asked, you know, do the two projects need to be different, or are they likely to be the same? We should say that, you know, part of the idea of the MRes is that you get very diverse research experience. So we do encourage you to choose projects which are not the same for the two separate projects. So typically that would mean doing a project in a different lab with a different supervisor for project 2 as compared to project 1. Okay, so you know, there's lots of different ways you can meet that requirement to get different experience, but generally it just means moving from one research group to another research group for your second project. It's quite easy to do. In the past, we've usually had upwards of, say, 120 to 150 projects to choose from across the course. As we've said already, you know, we don't quite know exactly how many we'll have this time round. One person did point out that on our website, we have some text saying that the curriculum of the program is currently being reviewed. Apologies for that, that's a bit out of date. We went through a phase of curriculum review. That means just going over everything that's taught in the program and make sure it's fully up to date and providing engaging learning experience. We did that last year, and unfortunately we have omitted to take that text off. So don't worry, the program as described on the website is what you will get. I think there's one other question I can see not answered, which is in the case of lockdown over a second wave, what are the safety measures we plan to introduce to prevent loss of content? Well, I think, our experience with the first wave of COVID, we're just emerging from lockdown in the UK now, is essentially the kind of approach we would take. So as we say, all our projects will have remote content so that they can be pursued remotely, even if there is also some lab content as well. So we'll make sure that supervisors offer, if you like, remote backup plans if there is a second lockdown. And for the core program, the Wednesday mornings, again, as I mentioned, those almost entirely can be delivered remotely, fairly straightforwardly by webinars or journal clubs that we hold online or something like that. So it's quite easy to do to move from something that may involve some on-campus work to completely remote if we need to. But as I say, we're hoping that that won't happen. But we've taken the view that we need to plan for all scenarios. So we have the opportunity to deliver the teaching on campus partially. We can do blended learning where partially on campus and partially online, or we can do it completely online if we have to. So hopefully that answers that question. Oh, one other question just quickly come through. What should we get ready for the coming term? Okay, that's a very good question. I noticed actually one thing I think we haven't covered in that area. Somebody asked earlier on, when should they contact potential research supervisors? Now, you do not have to contact supervisors before the term starts in October, but if you want to, that's perfectly fine. For instance, if you're interested in a very specific area of research and you know there's somebody at Imperial doing that type of research, feel free to contact them. You can say that, if you've got an offer, you're planning to come to Imperial College in October, or you're planning to start the course in October, and, what sort of research, how is their research going under COVID, for instance. So it's perfectly fine for you to contact people saying that you're an incoming student, but you don't absolutely have to. It's not a requirement. As we said, we'll be distributing the project list in late September. So, that's normally the first point at which people start to think about exactly, which labs and which research groups they might like to join. In terms of other preparations, there isn't a great deal apart from, I think, probably for those of you for whom English is not your first language, it's probably a good idea to make sure that, your English skills are brushed up, and there are some pre-sessional English courses that you might be able to register on, and you should look at the academic English department within Imperial to see if you can register for those if you're interested. I don't know, Duncan or Liz, any other thoughts about what people should prepare for the coming term?
I mean, we don't usually have any sort of preparation, to be honest. I mean, there's nothing specific. Pre-COVID, we didn't used to have anything specific. Whether there's anything specific for now, it's potentially COVID lockdown, I'm not sure. I mean, I think they're just going to join and it will kick off in the usual way. There won't be the drinks reception, though.
That's right. We normally have one or two social activities, especially at the beginning of term, which do include some refreshments. And unfortunately, if we're still in a kind of socially distanced or restricted situation, we won't be able to do those. But we'll make that decision nearer the time. And if we're able to do some kind of socialization, then obviously we'll try and do it. And but if some students are not able to attend, that's not a problem at all.
I mean, one thing I would say is, I mean, presumably you guys are all okay, but you need a fully functional computer with audio and visual so that you can join in on the remote sessions. And if you've got a laptop that's about to pack up, then you might need to upgrade it, something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, hopefully everybody who's joined this session, then probably you're okay. But yes, certainly, we will be delivering quite a lot of content online, whether it be core program or perhaps remote supervision sessions with your supervisor. So it is important that you do have the wherewithal to do that.
And can I just say welcome to Jean, who apparently is a nuclear physicist undergraduate.
Yep, as we said, we have a wide variety of people coming in. So it's going to be interesting for you all to meet each other, even if it's virtually. One final thing, which I don't think we covered, is some of you may be worried about whether, if you do travel to London in October, how easy it will be to obtain accommodation. Should you find university accommodation or private accommodation? And if a lot of content is being delivered online, will it be worth it? Ultimately, that's your decision, of course. Imperial does have some accommodation services, obviously related to student halls and things like that. I think if you have specific questions about that, please write to Noelia, who's the program administrator, and hopefully she'll be able to point you to the right place. Noelia, I don't know if there's anything you particularly want to say about that side of things, student accommodation, or?
No, just I think the university are taking measures to make sure that everybody that needs to be on site can be and has accommodation available as much as they can. And any questions, yes, please send me an email.
And obviously we understand that, accommodation and living costs are one of the biggest costs, especially in London. So, your decision whether to travel to London or not, it probably will be strongly influenced by that. So, as we already mentioned several times, if you decide that you can't make it to London, you're not going to be disadvantaged by doing a remote project, at least at the beginning in the autumn term.
One of the things that colleges looking into is that in South Kensington, at least, we are surrounded by hotels all over the place, and they will be looking to sell out their rooms, and there's a possibility that Imperial College is going to negotiate with these hotels to get low rates, because the hotels will be thinking a low rate is better than no rate, and that's something that's seriously actually being looked at the moment. Yes,
so you never know, you might have the opportunity to stay in a nice West London hotel.
Exactly.
Just one or two other quick questions, and I think we should draw this to a close. Somebody says, is there a Facebook page or a WhatsApp group? Currently, we don't normally, as a program, set up those social media groups because we prefer for students and applicants to get together sort of by themselves. We don't want anybody to feel that we as a set of organisers are kind of watching you or monitoring what you say or anything like that. I know that many of you might be keen to meet or get in touch with other applicants or possibly current students. I think there was already some information about some of the schemes for getting in touch with current students. I don't remember the name of the scheme. Do you remember, Noelia? Something Buddy, Student Buddy, something like that? Okay.
Unibuddy.
Unibuddy, that's right. You should be able to find something about that on the Imperial website. But if you want, for instance, to get in touch with our current students and you can't find details, please just let us know. We'll try and hook you up. There's another quick question about time differences. So again, we know that many of you might be in other time zones. That's partly why we've scheduled this at midday in the UK time zone, so that it's relatively accessible to people all the way from West Coast US to China. Yes, we will try to schedule teaching sessions at an appropriate time. So for instance, at the moment, we're scheduling most of our sessions in the morning because most of our remote students, if they're not in the UK, they're in time zones towards the east. So we have a number of people in mainland China who are currently on the course. So for instance, we schedule sessions about 10 till 12 in the UK in the morning. So it's roughly sort of early evening for those people. So we will obviously decide exactly how to do that scheduling when we know what time zones people are in. And the other thing to say is that a lot of the sessions can easily be recorded, so that it's easy for people, if they can't make the session, to view that later on. Okay.
There's
Tim,
just one more.
yeah, Mario has got a question about where he can get this recording.
Okay, so we're going to send out details of that. I don't think we've decided exactly how to share it yet. Noelia, do you want to say one or two words what the plan will be for sharing the recording?
But the plan is going to be to either email it to everyone, on also possibly we will make it available on the website. That's
right. So if nothing else, we'll probably post a link on the website. Obviously, it won't be there forever because the answers we're giving you now are correct for the information we currently know. And, in 2 or 3 months' time, things may have changed. So we might need to sort of change it at that point. I do see that somebody has posted we could an optional Facebook link to make a group for applicants. So feel free to follow that link that's just been posted in the chat. Okay, so I think we probably better draw to a close. It's 5 minutes past the hour. So thank you to everybody who's joined. It's really great to see so many of you, or see so many names, people joining. We're really looking forward to meeting you, whether it be in person or virtually in October. We think you're going to get a really good experience, whether it be online only or blended or on campus. We will do what we can to support you and give you the master's degree that you really need. Okay. If you have further questions, please do get in touch. I suggest actually that you can use the form that was already used for submitting questions. We'll keep monitoring that and try and put things together. And the other thing is anything that we haven't answered, or the main questions, I think we're going to try and put together some kind of frequently asked questions list on the website so that the main issues that people worry about hopefully will be addressed there. So thank you very much, and we look forward to being in touch with you over the next few months and seeing you in October. Okay.
Bye everybody.
Bye bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.